So the real question that we need to identify today, can President Biden finish his term? Can he stand for re-election? Can he serve 4 more years? Actually, though, what I think that is an even bigger issue is should he? Should he serve another 4 years? Should he continue to even serve here? Because while everybody has been focused for quite some time now on what's happening on some of these, the debate stage from a couple of weeks ago, on the Stephanopoulos interview a week or so ago, on the NATO press conference that he held afterwards. Everyone was so focused on, could he get through it? Did he have any big gaffes? Was he able to string together a sentence? And while there's some utility in that, some of the bigger questions that were not addressed that we're going to talk about today is the substance under what he was saying. Whether he got them all out of his mouth or not, right? The question that we haven't examined enough yet is the substance of, is the policies that he's advocating, are they good? Is he being honest about what he has accomplished? And are people being blind to the truth behind some of the claims that he makes? And I argue that is much more important than even the first part here, because they all go together. Everything has some importance, but let's not get so focused on the words that we forget to take a look at the substance under those words. So first of all, we're just going to toss this little one out here. Because it's a small thing by itself, but it's indicative of a bigger issue.
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
Yeah, that's earlier in that same day, he had inadvertently called President Zelensky President Putin. And at least in the first one, he caught it just a second or two later, said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I meant Zelensky." So he caught it. He didn't catch this one. So those were on the same day. And again, by themselves, it's like, okay, that could be an embarrassment. But as I'm going to show you here in just a second, there was an expert on NBC News, a Parkinson's expert who is a Democrat. Let me preface this by saying this. This guy is a Democrat. He is for President Biden, but he's being honest about his profession. And he's going to explain a few things that you have to watch for, and what to him is extremely self-evident that there are some issues. Pay close attention to what he describes as the indicators of this significant cognition. And then I want you to remember those as we follow a clip from Biden right after it. Watch this first.
It's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemma dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Rigidity, loss of arm swing, standing up lordically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of en bloc turning. It's not a quick turn. So that's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the low voice that said was a cold hypophonia. A small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism.
Yeah, so the rigidity, the slow movements, and the voice that's kind of like this, whatever. That's what he just told you to watch for. Now, in the clip that I'm going to show in a second, where he's actually demonstrating all those, but you may remember this from a month or so ago, and you literally see him living out exactly what was talking about there. You see everybody else is looking around, they're moving to the music. He is just like a not, what do you call it? Not a doll, but a mannequin. You just kind of standing there. He's not moving. Until finally he does, and you see all of his moves are very, very slow. And it just really is pretty indicative of what he's talking about. But that's one moment. And again, everybody can say, well, that was just a moment there. Now then, we're starting to see a lot of these moments strung together. Now, in light of everything that Parkinson's expert just told you to watch for, check this out from President Biden trying to convince us all that he's actually in good shape.
I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. and they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But but I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity, the decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it. Creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention.
The only thing age does is create wisdom. I'm not sure that's the only thing age does. Now, listen, I'm the first to acknowledge and to actually advocate that people who have lived a long time on earth and have gone through a lot of stuff and have seen things, lived them out, there is wisdom that comes along with that. We should absolutely value that. The Bible, for example, allows that kind of thing, that you should take, heed to the wisdom of those who are, long in the tooth, who have the gray hair. There's a good reason to do that. But when you're talking about who's going to lead the country, wisdom is crucial. It's important to have as long as you have the vitality necessary to conduct the job. So that is the first question, the first issue that everybody's been talking about. So I do want to point that out, that it is a valid issue and something that we need to take into consideration. And the Democratic Party itself, even before the election comes around, has to decide, is this the guy that we want to put on the ticket? And that's up to them. Right now, it's entirely in the Democratic Party's hands to decide whether he does or whether he doesn't. But then it's going to come to our choice on February or November the 5th. And that's where everybody's going to get their say into what they think. And that's why the Democrats have a difficult choice now, because do they want to let somebody get up there that the people, when they get a chance to decide who's going to go into the White House, where are they going to go? So we'll watch and see how that goes on. But listen, to me, the more important issues are what Biden said, the policies that he laid out, the claims that he has made. And so many people have been focused on whether he can get the words out that they haven't even paid attention to what he said and examined them based on the reality, based on what the facts say, and based on things he didn't say or things he left out, which are vital to understand. Whoever you're going to select in November, you better make sure that that's the person that's going to be able to do the job and who has the ideas that give us the best chance of success. So I want to take a look now at least three major areas with a fourth one at the end on a slightly different topic about some of the things he claimed and to make sure you understand what's really going on. First of all, I want to look at something he said, and these are all comments just within the last couple of weeks, I believe. He was talking in this one about a meeting he had in June of 2021 with Vladimir Putin, shortly after he took office, and he's using this to show how strong he was. Check it out.
I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva. And he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine. I said, you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. No, that's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me?
Okay, so for those who may not be aware, that the Finlandization process that he's talking about there is referring back to something that happened decades back in the Cold War, where Finland chose neutrality. And so they were neutral. They weren't not NATO. They were not Warsaw Pact. They were just a neutral nation. And so the president here is trying to be clever and saying, oh, you wanted the Finlandization of Ukraine, i.e. to make Ukraine a neutral state. And he said, instead, what you got is the NATOization of Finland. And so now Finland is no longer neutral. They're actually in NATO. And so certainly to his supporters, it's like, yeah, that's a good deal because, Putin was trying to keep Ukraine out of NATO. Instead, he gets Finland and Sweden in NATO. So, take that, Vlad. So that's a big success. That's what he's trying to paint. He's trying to show you in clever ways that his actions in June 2021 had backfired on Putin. And so what Putin said was wrong. Here's what he's not telling you. And here's what this horrific toll is what happened as a result of Biden's unwillingness to even discuss neutrality for Ukraine in June of 2021. But as I've told many of you in a show in the past, I had in Washington, D.C., a meeting with a senior diplomat for a certain country that's very friendly to the United States. It's been 2 or 3 months back now, I think, where he told me that according to his sources, people that he talked to in that June 2021 meeting, Putin told Biden that if you continue trying to push NATO into Ukraine, then I'll use force. Apparently, he point blank told him that. We know for certain that Putin told Jens Stoltenberg because he publicly admitted it. So that gives a lot of credibility to what my diplomatic friend told me. In that meeting, my friend was told that Biden said, sure, if you want to, go ahead, do whatever you think. But we're going to crush you because we're a lot bigger than you. We're going to crush your economy and all this kind of stuff. So he just categorically said, nope, not even going to talk about independence and neutrality for Ukraine. What has been the result of that? So that was not a threat by Putin. That was not a bluff by Putin. He meant it. He acted on it. And so now then we see since that time, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian people, troops, civilians, men, women, children, had been killed. A fully 20% of their country has been captured. Untold numbers of cities have been reduced to rubble and just dust. More and more of their population has fled. Millions of them, tens of millions apparently, or more than 10 million by many accounts. They're continuing to leave to this day, especially the military age males, because they're terrified of being press ganged off the street and thrown to the front and killed in battle. So everything has gone bad for Ukraine. There is no military solution that will reverse the situation for Ukraine. Point blank. It is just categorically eliminated. It would take decades for even the possibility to return that. And that was only after the war had ended and they have a chance to rebuild their strength and all that. So there's no possibility in the near term at all. Zero. That is what we have gotten. That is what this president has wrought for Ukraine. So while he's bragging on himself on the one hand about that he got Finland into NATO, okay, that is a marginal ability improvement, for the NATO alliance. Just a little bit. That it's not exactly like the Finland military is some juggernaut that's going to create this, great military capacity that NATO will be a lot more strengthened because of it. As I have argued and did at the time, the primary result of adding Finland and Sweden has just been to expand the risk for the United States and the rest of NATO. Because now then there's 2 more countries that have Article 5 guarantees that could additionally get us sucked into a war that we should never fight. So it's increased America's vulnerability. It's increased the number of states that we now have to potentially defend. And it has been absolutely catastrophic for the Ukrainian people. Is that what we want to hold up as a vision of something that we should laud and applaud and continue to give another chance to have 4 more years to keep making these decisions? I think it's a terrible indictment, not something to be proud of. That's one thing. Then the next thing I want to talk about was this one was when he was talking to George Stephanopoulos, and he's trying to brag about what he put together.
George, I'm the guy that put NATO together, the future. No one thought I could expand it. I'm the guy that shut Putin down. No one thought could happen.
Okay, I just talked to you about the NATO piece, so I don't need to go into any more on that. But let's look at the second half of that. I'm the guy that shut Putin down. Now, what do you think he might mean with that? Because I can't think of anything. So far, what we've seen is that like he apparently told Putin in June 2021, we're going to crush you with economic sanctions and ruin your economy. He said that publicly many times in the months leading into the war. You don't hear him say much about that anymore because it completely backfired. It is not the Russian economy. Russian economy has grown. It is now stronger. It is in a higher category now than it was before the war. And I think in some terms, in some categories, more than it ever has been. And so instead of crushing Putin, instead of stopping him, we have seen him expand. And it's not just that he's expanded, but it's how he's done it. So we love to go in and just sanction the hell out of everybody. That's one of our favorite tools. We love military force. We love to threaten the use of it. And we love sanctions because those are easy. You don't have to think. It's just something you lob out there and it makes you look good. So some people think. Many people in Washington think. And yet, when you look at the track record of these things, they're abysmal failures. They don't accomplish anything of value for our side. And what have they done in this case? What they have done is it has forced Russia to find new markets. Instead of doing business with the Western Europe and other European countries, whether that's in energy trade, anything else, now they've had to find other markets. So they've gone into Asia, they've gone into, in some cases, South America, into Africa, all these other places. And now then they're finding new customers for their goods, energy, etc. Now, what do you think that does for the possibility of sanctions? It continues to just eliminate the possibility of utility, even to impose pain if that's what you wanted to do. Because now Russia's got other people that aren't subject to our sanctions or that don't care. And what has that done in some of the other terms of alliances? I'm going to talk about that in a separate clip here in a second. But you see that everywhere you want to look, they're stronger economically. Concurrently, Western Europe, weaker economically. Germany, in particular, has been heavy hit by this. Their economy is much worse than it was before the war, and in large measure because their energy is now more expensive. Instead of getting the cheap stuff from Russia, they now have to get more expensive stuff elsewhere in the world, and the importation costs and everything else makes it a lot more expensive. So their cost to do business, the same business, is now a lot higher. And of course, that gets passed on to customers. That has negative implications for their entire economy, and that's exactly what has played out. You see, Hungary is saying, we're right on the border in this. And they say, we're not going to participate in these dumb things because it's not good for our country. We've talked about Viktor Orban a lot, but that just shows you that the bigger issue here is that you're having a split from NATO. You're not bringing NATO closer together, which is the claim all the time. He says, I'm the one that expanded NATO. And, in other clips, he says, we're now more unified than we've ever been in our history. Nonsense. Heading into this 75th anniversary, you had Viktor Orban go to see Putin in Moscow, to see Xi Jinping in Beijing, to see several other. He actually went to see Zelensky himself. And he's been talking all over the place about we need to have peace talks. He told Stoltenberg about a month or so before, we're not going to participate in all this stuff that you're doing with NATO. We're not going to help you're not going to funnel weapons across our territory. We're not going to participate in that. We're not going to send money because it's a lost effort, not losing, lost, past tense. And now then you see Hungary, not only Hungary, but also Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Turkey. Other NATO members are now also saying, yeah, about all this permanent, just send weapons to Ukraine. Maybe we should talk a little peace. So you see there's already a split growing in. I think time is going to see that grow larger, especially as the realization starts to sink in on many other countries that because there is no military path to victory for Ukraine, why would I want to continue sending military equipment, getting rid of my own inventories of ammunition, sending our own money? This doesn't make any sense at all. So I think you're going to see that split grow. So you see there that President Biden is talking about ways that just is not helping our country. It's not helping the alliance. And then the last portion of his comment there about knocked Putin down militarily, they are much stronger now than they were in February of 2022. So they burned off a lot of the chaff that they had because they had some very weak leaders all the way up to generals and even down to brigade and battalion commanders who performed horribly in the first year or so of the war. Those guys have been burned off. They've been fired. Many of them were killed in combat, and they've been replaced by guys who have performed. Meanwhile, the Russian industry has woken up. And so they see, okay, we better make some changes. And now all of a sudden they're outproducing the entire West almost by themselves in ammunition, especially artillery ammunition. They got a huge number of drones coming out. Apparently, they might not be ahead of Ukraine in that one category, but it's very close. They're pretty high on that. But every other category, hands down, they're up. Air defense systems, air power systems, engineering, and especially electronic warfare. The number of troops, the type of training they're getting. I mean, across the board, they have all the systems in place. You've heard Colonel Jacques Beau on our channel many times talk about the crucial role played by systems that are in place that support war. Russia has all that. Ukraine has virtually none. So everything that you just heard President Biden claim as success there is actually a significant failure and loss. We continue on here. Now that he also talked about how he's going to go to help Xi Jinping, or he's going to push back on Xi Jinping. So let's move over to another theater. So now into the Asia Pacific area. Watch this.
There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. The idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Man, that last part there was so important and so underappreciated and undervalued in the West. He says, yeah, there is some concern about China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran working together. And you can add, that's on the military dimensions. You can also add the whole BRICS issue that's coming up in a summit in October, where 97 countries around the world are invited in there, which could form a genuine, significant economic bloc that could pose serious problems to the Western economy, to the Western way of the world. So while you have President Biden starting off in that clip there, talking about how, we're going to tell China what's what, and they need to understand there's a price to pay. You know what? It almost doesn't matter anything that followed that sentence. In fact, it doesn't, because you see the exact opposite is what's being produced. Just like we see the exact opposite in these other areas where Biden was leading off there, especially for Ukraine in that war. You have the same thing going on here. So while we're trying to tell China, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're not going to do, here's the price to pay, what China is doing is saying, yeah, whatever you said, don't care. We're going to take care of our national interests. And so you see them taking more and more action antithetical to American interest. They're getting more aggressive in the Taiwan issue. They're getting more aggressive in the South China Sea. And now then they're forming more and more military alliance movement with Russia. You see the NATO summit, one of the parts of its declaration where it said that we have growing concerns about China, that they're enabling Russia. You see that before that, the U.S. has said in I think a year or so ago, that basically China is an adversary in some of our official documents and some of the Pentagon documents. And listen, all that does is just alienate China more and more. And they are not 1991 weak China. These is now a global superpower in militarily, nuclear weapons, and economically. And If we don't recognize that as such and treat them as such, then we're going to continue to harm our interests. Now, that doesn't mean to submit to anything. That doesn't mean you have to kowtow to them at all. It just means that you have to be honest and recognize they are a global player. They are someone that you must reckon with now, and that they have the capacity to harm our interests if we're not careful. And if we continue to be arrogant and presumptuous and still think in our own minds it's 1991 and we can do whatever we want, we're going to find just how bad it can get to our own harm. So since President Biden has been in office, and since he's been prosecuting the Russia-Ukraine war, since he's been continuing to talk about expanding NATO, not just up, into Finland and Sweden and possibly into Ukraine, but also let's pivot into Asia and let's do stuff against China. All you're doing is creating more and more enemies for the United States, more adversaries, more people with power working against our interest. How is this in our American, positive interest? Why would we want to keep going down a path that is seeing us deteriorate our standing more and more, to see our adversaries grow in power, more and more powerful, with more and more incentive to taking actions against us? This makes no sense, folks. This makes no sense at all. So before Biden came in there, you had, like you said, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran had some quasi level of cooperation, but not any kind of a military alliance. Now you have an outright military document signed, an agreement with North Korea that has providing direct weapons to Russia and technology directly to North Korea. And so that's making both of them stronger against either us or our allies in North and South Korea. And this is going to extend long beyond this war. Once this war's over, it's not like that Russia's going to say, okay, cool. All right, see you, North Korea. We'll see if there's another war in the future. I mean, these are relationships that are now established. With all probability, these things are going to continue to grow over time. It's going to continue to make our adversaries stronger and more united. And the more incentive we give them, the more reason they have to keep trying to expand that. And so one of the things we've shown is that you saw Putin with making some deals, economic deals with Vietnam, with India, and Africa, South America. I mean, all over the place. He is continuing to spread his influence and his the resources and his base of resources at our expense. There's been a number of cases, specifically in Africa, to where some of the bases that America has had for years and years, we've now been kicked out. And guess who was welcomed in? Russia. A lot of these things are small scale, but it's the implication and the imagery that it's having an outsized impact, because it looks like we can't do anything and people are getting tired of us. And then they do want Russians, and they're filling in the gap there. So they're pushing us out. And all of this is because of our policies and the arrogance that we have and the unwillingness to acknowledge that the world isn't 1991 anymore. I mean, I keep saying that, but it is so profound. And one of the biggest issues I think I have with the current administration, and really, it's not even just the current administration. The previous administrations had just as many problems with this. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump before, even though I think Trump has a lot better foreign policies in some areas, like the Russia-Ukraine war. There are other big problems in there too, and we can get into that in a future scenario here. But this is an American problem here. It's just right now, this is the current administration that wants to be rehired for a second term, and we need to be aware of just what we're facing here. The last thing I want to talk about is more domestic related, and it's about this claim that one side or the other is really democracy and they are trying to defend it. Kind of falls on a little bit of deaf ears. Watch this.
But do you think our democracy is under siege based on this court? Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025? Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education, make sure, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why you say hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job.
So first, let's look at the last part there, because that feeds in again to the arrogance narrative. It's not just that he thinks the United States is this great power. You see me use a number of times this one of the other clips from the Stephanopoulos interview where he says, "Hey, I'm not just running for president; I'm running the world." I mean, he actually thinks that. He thinks that he is this incredibly important figure that the world can't do without. And apparently, he also believes that America can't do without. He apparently doesn't think that anyone else in the entire Democratic Party can take care of the job, that I have to finish this. I have to go. You see, by itself, that's indicative of a substantial problem with arrogance and presumptuous, that I'm, this delusional figure that thinks that I'm more important than everybody. Nobody else can do it but me. And we have to keep going on there. Separately, some of the substance of what he said in that clip there. And of course, he's talking about that he thinks Donald Trump would be a danger to democracy, many in the Democratic Party as well. And they list a number of factors that they come in there. And of course, a lot of those are very much dependent upon one's interpretation, because it's ironic that you also hear many in the Republican Party saying a whole bunch of things in the Democratic Party are actually a bigger threat to democracy than anything being claimed on the Republican side. And that's not entirely without some substance. They talk about the weaponization of the Justice Department. And as I've said a few times and will repeat here, it's pretty suspicious looking that, we go after the number one Republican threat to winning the presidency for the Democrats and Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden he gets charged with all these crimes. No other president has ever been charged with stuff. And I assure you, there have been many former presidents that were suspected of many guilty things when they were in office. And of course, the one that highlights this discrepancy the most of all, in my view, is the charge against Trump about using classified documents, where he had them in his house, there at Mar-a-Lago. A lot of things that go along with that. They were for sure there. There's questions about how they were handled, what happened when they were asked for it, et cetera. And then they end up charging him for them. Now, if the Justice Department was going to say that's the standard and we're going to apply that to everyone, then probably David Petraeus would be in jail today instead of getting a slap on the wrist and now still being on television every day. And you'd probably have Vice President Pence would also have been indicted because he had some classified documents, which he said on national television he didn't have. Nothing happened with that. And of course, the biggest one of all, Joe Biden, who also had a bunch of documents in his garage, classified, going back to his vice presidency days. There's no telling how long they'd been in there. The Justice Department did an investigation, expressly stated publicly that it was illegal, it was unauthorized. He did have them. It broke the law, except they're not going to try him, in large measure because they said he was an old man and couldn't remember things very well. So, that's too sad. Okay, either we're going to follow the law or we're not, folks. Either we're going to charge Trump because he broke the law, and then we're going to do the same to everybody, or we're going to do the same to nobody. Now, I come down on we should apply the law that we have no matter what. It should genuinely be blind. If you break the law, if you violate the law, then you're going to be charged and you have to defend yourself. And if you're found guilty by a jury of your peers, then you'll pay the price for it. Anyone. I think that that's what you should do. But what you can't do is to selectively apply it and say, especially if I'm the one that's in power, I'm running for another election, and my number one opponent committed the same crime I did, and we're going to convict, go after him. That just doesn't work. So you want to be talking about democracy. There's some bigger issues even in the Democratic Party. And that's not to say that there's not some genuine problems and concerns about the Republican Party too, because there are some. But we need to apply a consistent standard to everybody so that democracy works for the nation and not just for one party, whoever has power at any time. That's when a country starts to fall apart, when you have selective application of the law, and it depends on who's in power at any one given time. And that's something we need to avoid. But you see, all of this together paints a really troubling picture. It's not just how the Democrats approach justice or how they define democracy. It's not just whether Biden can cognitively handle the situation here. It's not just whether his policies in Europe are useful, his policies in Asia are useful or counterproductive. But you see, it's all of this combined, and it's a very, very troubling picture. And I wish I could just say, the obvious answer is we'll vote for his opponent. vote for Donald Trump and that'll solve it, because I'm not sure that that's going to solve it, because I think that, as I've said a couple of times, this is an American problem and something we're going to have to deal with going forward. But I think it's crucial that you know the facts. When you're getting ready to vote for the Americans in our audience today in November, you need to know the truth behind it. Don't get so excited about your party and demonize your opponent that you stop looking at the reality. You stop looking at the facts, because we could unwittingly find ourselves voting somebody into power that is going to harm our interests in ways that we can't even imagine. And folks, let me just leave you with this. The risk that we face with a potential expanding war in the Russia-Ukraine war that could include the United States, especially if we keep taking provocative actions against the Russians and continue to strike targets inside of Russia that had nothing to do with producing a positive outcome for Ukraine, because there is none, or if we keep pushing things in directions in Asia, especially as regards to China over the Taiwan issue. That's the biggest flashpoint. There are others. But if we keep going in directions that are antithetical to our interests, we may one day find we go over a line that we don't know about, and then you can't get back across it without suffering large loss, bloodshed, loss of military, ships getting sunk, planes getting knocked out of the sky, territory being lost. The potential consequences are huge. And the thing that just animates me so much is that none of it is necessary. We can have sane policies in Europe. We can have sane policies in Africa, in South America, in Asia, that preserve our strength, that preserve our democracy at home, that preserve our ability to prosper economically and keep us safe from attack. We do have a strong military. I have a lot of concerns about, how strong it is and things we could definitely do to make it stronger for our national defense. But what we need to do is to stop doing things that more look like for the offense, that go out in search of dragons to slay, to find enemies. And that is nothing but a losing proposition that drains our strength, it dissipates our power, and invites potential counter strikes from others at some point. So I hope that you'll pay attention to the facts as you get ready to vote, but also understand that there is a path. There truly is a path to where we can have a good, safe country and a good, safe world that protects our interest and does not lead us into destruction. We'll talk about that in the future too. But I just really appreciate you guys paying attention today. Do something for me here. If you haven't already, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. That has more of an impact than you think. Hit that like button. Again, you may not think that matters any, but it matters a lot for the algorithms on YouTube, and that helps us expand our knowledge base here. That helps us expand who gets to see the show. And I think we all are in this together, and we all want to make sure people get the truth of this. I know that's why a lot of you are watching here, because you're getting the truth here. You're not getting a political bias one way or the other, but this is the ground truth of what's happening, and we want to help other people get that too. You can help us by doing that. Thank you very much. We got a lot of good shows for you coming on next week. So be sure to tune in, watch our channel there, and you'll see them being promoted. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.